So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you all a little bit of language or terminology to start to use as you start to think about really leading with the student experience and the student voice as we talk about personalized and blended learning. I think I am. Maybe I'm not. Yes, I am. Okay. So those of y'all that know me, I think in formulas and equations, sort of simplifies things a little bit in my mind. When we think about student-centered learning, or starting with the student voice, we think about personalized learning and competency-based learning. And if you remember early on in the grant description that we sent out, there were some core pillars, right? And we said blended learning is a critical way to scale some of these really important elements being personalized and competency-based learning. The big question, though, what you see all over the language with this grant is how do we do this at scale? And how do we do this in a financially sustainable way? Because I could achieve student-centered learning if I had one tutor per every kid, right? No problem. I could crush it. I could do the milkshake thing all day, every day, right? But there's no way we can afford that. There's no way we can financially, sustainably scale that. And then many of us actually start doing student-centered learning. We all have through differentiation or centers or whatever it may be, but then we always hit up against this, gosh, there's just the ratio right now of student to teacher isn't quite there, right? So I think you all understand these aren't new terms. It's just me giving language and rearranging them in an equation that I think will help you build consensus in your district around where blended learning fits as it relates to trying to achieve student-centered learning. So again, putting a flag on the fact that none of this is new. Y'all have been, the reason you are here in our top 74, you have been doing this. What I want to do now is help you rearrange the language and use it in a way that helps you think about how blended learning can start to achieve some of these things at scale, okay? So let's do some quick definitions. So when we say personalized learning, we're talking about tailoring the instructional environment. We're talking about giving students the opportunity to take ownership over their learning, right? We've all talked about this. You heard Rebecca talk about it. You're really going to hear Brian talk about it. Give these students ownership over their learning. We've talked about flexible learning environments, right? Understanding that there are different modalities that we need to embrace in order to achieve personalized learning. And then all operational elements, everything we do, responds to students' goals and students' needs. So rather than saying this is the building we have because we have it, so now let's figure out how to educate our students, we flip that and we say what do the students need and how can we figure that out? All right, so competency-based learning. Students advance upon mastery. All of you are like, Kat, state of Texas, hello. We can't do this. We've got grades. We've got end-of-year tests. I hear you. I hear you. I hear you. I hear you. I also recognize that now is the time for us to collectively start to think about that in order to truly achieve student-led learning, student-based learning, personalized learning, we need to start thinking about competency-based progression. And collectively, we can do that. We've been doing it around the country and a couple of other hot spots. We've been doing it here. So as you think about your pilot, you have permission to think about competency-based progression, and then we will collectively think about policy impacts or whatever there may be, assessments, things like that, accountability, okay? But let's agree that we collectively are going to realize that competency-based progression probably needs to be a part of this, so let's band together and figure out what that may look like, all right? Competencies include explicit, measurable, transferable learning objectives that empower students. Assessment is meaningful and positive, and students receive rapid, differentiated support, okay? Rapid, differentiated support. The whole point in competency-based progression is that we're constantly getting data and providing feedback. To Heather's point, providing feedback when students can use the feedback right away. Teachers can use it, parents can use it, okay? I know you feel like Kat can't do this in the accountability system. Let's collectively think about how we can, all right? Again, so if you look at all this, you're like, okay, I can do this, I get it, but how do we do this at scale? This is where I would say personalized learning plus competency-based learning or progression raised to blended learning achieves student-centered learning at scale, okay? So if you think about this, you have been doing differentiation, you have been doing center-based. Now, think about how you can bring in technology to reduce some of the barriers you were experiencing when you were doing personalized instruction already. You can reduce the student-teacher ratio because you can hopefully, maybe, potentially bring in technology, whether it's station rotation, whatever it may be, right? Start to think about how you can actually utilize technology in a smart way in order to achieve student-centered learning at scale. So what is the power of personalized learning and competency-based learning in a blended learning classroom? So what are some of the things we need? It was really neat when we were in the blue station, I forgot which team it was, and I'm sorry, but someone said, Kat, we can do this, but how's everyone supposed to know what that student needs at any given time? Right now, it's similar to an IEP. So for my kids in special ed, I've got a killer IEP system. I know exactly what motivates that student. I know where they are. They're constantly assessed. That's great, but I don't have that for every student. And so they were sort of struggling, what do I need to create? Do I just have to sort of send out emails? Do we update the SIS? I would say one term that you can use through this process as you're piloting is a learner profile. So think about creating a learner profile. It can be a piece of paper, you guys. If you're starting your pilot in a classroom, a learner profile can be literally a piece of paper and a pen. Kat Alexander, what motivates Kat? Where is she? What did I do with literacy right now, et cetera, et cetera. Learner profile, but the point is it's there, it's documented. I can review that with Kat. I can review it with all the other teachers that are supporting Kat. I can review it with Kat's parents, et cetera, okay? The second thing I think, folks, that we need to think about is a personal learning path. So we need to start to involve students, and we've heard this morning, in their path, in their journey, and really making that visible and transparent as well, right? So not only what does Kat look like right now in her learner profile, but also the personal learning path. Where is she going? If she's motivated by X, then what can we provide in order for her to achieve Y? So again, learner profiles, each learner has an up-to-date record documenting strengths, needs, motivations, and goals. Can be a paper and pen, but what did I say? In order to achieve scale sustainably, we need to think about blended learning. So there's technology that exists. And as we progress through this process, you're going to have support that we bring in from folks that can sit with you and start to go through questions really thoughtfully about what are you trying to achieve, what would your learner profile look like in your district, what are some technology solutions that exist out there. This is a snapshot of one technology solution. There are a variety of them out there, okay? Same thing, personal learning paths. If we have a clear and customized path for each student, initially it can be in paper and pen, but raised to blended learning, there are software solutions out there. This morning you heard someone mention a playlist. It's basically the same thing. Personal learning path is basically what's Kat's playlist? Based on what I know about her, where she wants to go, what's her playlist? The use of technology allows us to get this stuff online, allows data-driven decision-making to be much faster, and allows transparency for everyone involved. Okay? And now the power of competency-based learning. Because if you think about it, if you go back here, and now all of a sudden you have a learner profile for all of your students and you've got personal learning paths, you've opened the floodgates, right? So if I'm here and I'm Kat, I'm like, I want to keep going. What do I need to do to get there? I want to highlight that. I want another star. I want 500 points, et cetera, right? So inevitably, you need to start thinking about competency-based progression. You need to start thinking about how can we support these students to keep going. So we've got learner profiles, a clear map of what. We've got personal learning paths, how Kat's going to get there. And then I say, you know, you really need to think about competency-based progression, on-demand assessments, and credit upon mastery. And this is where I know we have some policy issues in place, but we give you permission. Think about it today. Think about how you would go about creating a competency-based progression environment, and then let's figure out what we may or may not need to do. What we find in many cases is what we think is a policy barrier may actually be an operational barrier, and there may be some things that we can do in the interim in order to facilitate some competency-based progression movement, okay? And so here's where you start to see just some examples of competency-based progression. You know, on the front end, the student is able to see how he or she is doing, constantly assessed, whether it's an online content system or assessments you put in place. They're much more rapid. The student's able to be assessed much more frequently and see where he or she is. And then on the back, obviously, that goes back to the dashboard and the learner profile to be able to see how you're performing. So my journey, this was a fast journey. If you've been in the blue team, you know we're fast. We get through this quickly. So let's recap what we just talked about, because I really am just throwing out some terminology for you to have some consistent language as you start to do this. So the formula for student-centered learning, I think we've all agreed. Personalized learning plus competency-based learning is student-centered learning. Many of us are doing that, or you probably wouldn't be here. How on earth do we do this at scale? Oops. So at scale, we say raise this up to blended learning. In other words, sorry, the parens actually should be all the way over to personalized learning. But let's involve technology, right? So let's try, maybe we start with paper and pen on the learner profile and all of that stuff. But if we're going to do this at scale, we need to start thinking about technology. And we will, collectively, over the next couple of months and years, provide resources to support you all in thinking selecting the right technology. And then the last chunk is just the taxonomy as you think about this as a team. Learner profiles, great term to use. So you all can start to say, okay, what's the learner profile? What do we want to start with? Paper and pen? Do we want to actually start to look for technology? Is that important to us in our pilot as you all are designing? Personal learning paths, playlist, dashboard, whatever, a lot of different terminology. I just think personal learning paths is pretty descriptive. And then competency-based progression. On-demand assessments and credit upon mastery. It can't be off the table. Because if you do the other two things, if you really do learner profiles and personal learning paths, and you do what we're talking about here, student-centered learning, inevitably we need to start pushing the envelope on competency-based progression. So you have permission to do that, and we will be here to help you think about the barriers that you may come up against.